When discussing aviation in Southeast Asia, Indonesia's aviation industry is one of the most prolific in the region, as air travel has become the primary mode of transportation for the island chain that covers a distance of over 5,000 kilometers from west to east and over 1,700 kilometers from north to south. While there has been several airlines, including low-cost airlines that have opened up to serve the growing market of over 264 million people, one airline has been there since the beginning. An airline that has seen the political shift in Indonesia from a former Dutch colony to the independent state of Indonesia. The airline that will be featured in this video is Garuda Indonesia, the national carrier of Indonesia. Prior to World War II and the formation of Garuda Indonesia, Indonesia was served by an airline which resembled KLM, though it was not affiliated, named Royal Dutch Indies Airways, which served domestic flights within Indonesia as well as flights to Southeast Asian destinations and Australia. Following World War II, the airline would eventually be dissolved, and its assets would eventually lead to the formation of what we now know as Garuda Indonesia, though it was now a real KLM subsidiary operating under the name of KLM Interinsular Bedrift. Now, the airline was formed in the middle of a conflict between the Indonesians and the Dutch, as Indonesia formed its own government based in Jakarta by the mid-1940s, and the airline participated in special transport flights using DC-3 aircraft, with its first known commercial flight between Calcutta and Rangoon, operated by a team of aviators from Indonesia's Air Force, taking place in January of 1949. Later in 1949, the Netherlands would cede its claims over the Indonesian country, fully recognizing Indonesia's independence, and the airline would be nationalized and renamed as Garuda Indonesian Airways, which saw its first flights under the new name on December 28, 1949, between Jakarta and Yogyakarta. On the return flight, the flight carried then Indonesian President Sukarno on his way back to Jakarta to symbolize the move of the capital of Indonesia to Jakarta. In the first decade of Indonesia's independence, Garuda Indonesia would operate around 38 aircraft, including DC-3 aircraft and Convair 240s, and some staff of KLM who were assisting the KLM subsidiary before it became nationalized did assist the airline in its early formation, including the airline's first CEO, who was a Dutch national. As it continued to grow its domestic network, in 1956 it made its first international flight, a Hajj pilgrimage flight to Mecca, and flights would eventually be started to India. And soon Indonesia was experiencing a growth and interest for its tourism industry. And with the airline's transition to the jet age with DC-8 aircraft, the first flights to Europe were launched that featured a slate of destinations including Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Paris, Rome, and Prague. As Garuda Indonesia was continuing its growth, Indonesia was going through some political changes, including the rise of Indonesia's New Order led by new President Suharto in 1967. Though this didn't really affect Garuda Indonesia's growth plans, as the 1970s and the 1980s saw the acquisition of aircraft including the Boeing 747s, the DC-10s, MD-11, and the Airbus A300s. By the time the 1990s rolled by, Indonesia's tourism industry was booming, and the airline had its first link to North America via Los Angeles with a stop in Honolulu, Hawaii. Like many of its regional compatriots, Garuda Indonesia came from an era of national airlines and would be heavily affected by the 1997 Asian financial crisis, as well as the political and economic changes in Asia in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. During the post-Asian financial crisis era, the airline would eventually drop many of its routes that it opened, and Indonesia's government opened up competition in the domestic market thanks to deregulation in Indonesia's aviation industry, which saw several airlines offering new alternatives to the national airline. However, one incident in particular, the poisoning of Indonesian activist Munir Said Talib while on board a Garuda flight heading to Amsterdam in 2004, caught the international attention and led to a major scandal involving Garuda Indonesia. Along with a tarnished image, Garuda Indonesia was struggling in the aftermath of the 1997 financial crisis, which saw the delay in deliveries of Boeing 777 as well as 737-800 aircraft, and a European Union ban on Indonesian airlines from serving flights to Europe, between 2007 and 2009 impacted Garuda's plans for flights to and from Europe, and the airline was going through some financial difficulties, which prompted a restructuring program named the Quantum Leap in 2009. The 5-year plan would involve a major restructuring and a rebranding of the organization, as well as a fleet expansion program as it was facing competition from local and foreign competitors. As things started to turn around in the early 2010s, Garuda Indonesia would be publicly listed in Indonesia's stock exchange in 2011. Following going public in 2011, the airline would become a member of the SkyTeam Alliance in 2014 and would be named a 5-star airline by Skytrax the following year. While Garuda shares are traded publicly, the government of Indonesia still retains a 60% majority stake in the Jakarta-based airline. The airline currently serves over 80 destinations, with a majority 2/3 of the network to domestic destinations, served by a fleet of over 140 aircraft, including those operated by its subsidiaries, including CityLink and Sriwijaya Air, which Garuda Indonesia recently acquired in 2018. The airline utilizes Boeing 737-800 aircraft as well as Bombardier CRJ for most of its short-haul and domestic operations, while Airbus A330 and Boeing's 777 aircraft are used for its medium and long-haul operations. In terms of future aircraft, the airline currently has around 14 Airbus A330-900neo on order and had an order for over 50 Boeing 737 MAX 8s, which it cancelled. Garuda is currently negotiating with Boeing as to what to do with that order, which some reports have hinted that the airline will be switching those aircraft orders to newer Boeing 737 MAXs and the 787s. Garuda Indonesia's primary hub is the Soekarno-Hatta Airport in Jakarta, though with the geography of Indonesia, it operates several hubs with domestic routes in cities such as Medan, Surabaya, and Bali. And there are some international flights to and from Bali and Medan, including the services to Amsterdam and London. While Indonesia's aviation industry continues its growth, Garuda Indonesia has lost ground in the domestic market, with it now being the second largest in terms of domestic traffic in the country to the low-cost Lion Air Group. Though some of the players in the Indonesian aviation industry has since folded or have been acquired to form the duopoly of Lion Air and Garuda, which some have criticized for raising airfares in the domestic market, an issue that has since become a political issue, leading some in Indonesia's government, including President Joko Widodo, to consider opening up Indonesia's domestic market to foreign competitors. Now, Garuda has contended that some routes, including those that are less lucrative, have higher fuel costs, and the airline recently cut routes and capacity following a government mandate to lower the fare ceiling for some domestic markets. This issue of meeting the demands of lower fares by consumers in Indonesia's aviation market while maintaining a lucrative and viable operation is the current challenge of Garuda Indonesia today. For those of you, especially those who live in Indonesia and travel often within the country, what is your take on the current situation of the airfares in the domestic market in Indonesia, and would you like to see a foreign competitor be allowed by the Indonesian government to operate domestic flights within the country? Thank you for watching. This has been another edition of Flights in Asia, highlighting the news and updates from the aviation and travel scene from the Asia Pacific. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Once again, thank you for watching and have a great day.